In today's video, we'll dive into the paradox of post-World War II America, a nation defined by unity and prosperity on the surface, but bubbling underneath with questions of identity, freedom, and rebellion. We're calling this one Conformity and Rebellion, America in the post-war years. From suburban housewives to rebellious teens, from corporate clones to literary rebels, we'll take a look at how Americans responded to the powerful urge to belong and the rising desire to break free. Let's get started. After World War II, Americans felt triumphant. They were proud of their military success and industrial strength, ready to shift into a new age of peace and prosperity. But with the rise of suburban developments and middle class comfort came a profound sense of sameness. People moved to new communities, often filled with strangers, and in these unfamiliar settings, the need for companionship and shared identity created a social climate defined by conformity. As Fortune magazine declared in 1946, the American boom is on. But just a few years later, by 1954, one editor warned that conformity may very well become the central social problem of this age. And for many, it was. Work itself was changing. Fewer Americans were self employed. Manual labor began to decline as white collar jobs, which we call salaried positions, took center stage. By the mid 1950s, for the first time in U.S. history, white collar workers outnumbered blue collar workers. The war had supercharged the growth of big business, and by 1960, 38% of the American workforce was employed by companies with more than 500 employees. These massive corporations, government agencies, and universities didn't encourage rugged individualism. They promoted team players. Workers were expected to fit in, follow procedures, and align with the company's goals, not stand out. This culture of conformity wasn't limited to the workplace, it also reshaped the home. In 1956, Life magazine profiled the ideal American woman, a 32-year-old white suburban housewife and mother of four. Married at 16, she cooked, cleaned, sewed her family's clothes, threw dinner parties, sang in the church choir, volunteered in the PTA, and still made time for the campfire girls. She was held up as the model of perfection, reinforcing the post war revival of the cult of domesticity. The soaring birth rate only deepened the belief that a woman's primary accomplishment was motherhood. As Life put it, of all the accomplishments of the American woman, the one she brings off with the most spectacular success is having babies. Even though millions of women had worked during the war, they were now expected, even pressured, to return to the home, giving their jobs back to the returning male veterans. Post war America was on the move, literally. People relocated constantly, changing cities, states, and even just neighborhoods. In fact, about 20% of the population changed their residence each year. In search of roots and a sense of belonging, Americans became joiners. Civics clubs, bridge clubs, carpools, babysitting groups, and especially churches and synagogues. A full blown religious revival took shape. In 1940, fewer than half of adults were church members. By 1960, over 65% belonged to a church. Bible sales soared. Religious books, movies, and songs became staples of American life. Evangelists like Billy Graham used the growing power of radio and television to hold massive revival meetings. Government leaders encouraged it too. In 1954, Congress added Under God to the Pledge of Allegiance. The next year, In God We Trust became mandatory on all U.S. currency. Religion was helping Americans find common ground and reinforcing the norms of the era. But not everyone was content. Beneath the cheerful suburban surface, a wave of criticism surged, especially among intellectuals and writers. In The Organization Man of 1956, William H. Whyte argued that self reliance was being replaced by a new ideal, conformity. Success, he argued, came to those who could blend in and work as a team, not stand out. Sociologist David Riesman in The Lonely Crowd of 1950 made a similar case. He claimed Americans were shifting from inner directed individuals, guided by personal values, to other directed people, obsessed with social approval. Fiction writers added emotional depth to these themes. J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye of 1951 followed Holden Caulfield, a teen alienated by the phoniness of society. Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man of 1952 used a black narrator to explore how individuals, especially African Americans, struggled with isolation in a white dominated society. The sharpest rejection of conformity came from a loose group of young poets, writers, and artists known as the Beats, or beatniks to their critics. They rejected the materialism and artificiality of suburban America. Allen Ginsberg's 1955 poem Howl condemned robot apartments, invincible suburbs, skeleton treasuries, blind capitals, demonic industries. Jack Kerouac's On the Road of 1957 captured the spirit of youthful restlessness, telling the story of spontaneous cross country travel and rejection of societal norms. The Beats grew out of the bohemian underground of Greenwich Village and planted the seeds for the youth revolts of the 1960s. The baby boom generation came of age in the 1950s, and teens began forging a culture all of their own. With money in their pockets and more free time than any previous generation, teenagers created a booming market for youth oriented products, transistor radios, hula hoops, and, most famously, rock and roll records. But not all was well. By 1956, over 1 million teens were arrested each year. Fears of juvenile delinquency grew, and many blamed the growing influence of rock and roll. One reason for the rebellion? Cars. They gave teens freedom and, according to worried journalists, a private lounge for drinking and for petting or sex episodes. In 1951, Cleveland DJ Alan Freed noticed white teenagers buying black R&B records, music previously ignored by white audiences. He called this new style rock and roll. Soon, artists like Chuck Berry and Little Richard became stars. Richard, in particular, was held as a groundbreaking crossover artist, bringing black music to white middle class teens. Richie Valens, a pioneering Chicano rock artist, also broke barriers before his tragic death at the age of 17. Then came Elvis Presley, a 21-year-old truck driver from Memphis. Elvis fused black rhythm and blues with white country twang. When he released Heartbreak Hotel in 1956, it changed everything. Within 2 years, he was the most popular entertainer in American history. Rock and roll wasn't just a sound, it was a movement. and it laid the foundation for the youth revolts of the 1960s. In the decades after World War II, Americans built a society that was safer, richer, and more comfortable than ever before. But there was this growing tension between belonging and individuality, between comfort and authenticity. Whether through literature, religion, rebellion, or rock and roll, Americans found ways to both fit in and stand out. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.